everyone for coming to this butterfly presentation today. So to start out with designing a butterfly garden, the way I've approached it in the past and what I think is kind of an easy way to wrap your head around what we're doing is to imagine that you're opening a restaurant for the butterflies. So what I like to do, and in this example what I'm going to be doing is opening a pizza shop for butterflies. And that's how we're going to approach, the elements that go into our garden, how to lay out our garden. We're going to just act like we're opening a restaurant. Hopefully that'll make it easier for you to understand what we're doing. All right, so in restaurant terms, usually one of the most important things is going to be the location of where it's at. You normally want a place where there's either a lot of foot traffic or you want, a lot of car traffic driving by. In terms of how that translates into a butterfly garden, you're going to want a lot of flight traffic is what you're looking for. That generally means that you're going to want an area in your yard that is as open as can be. So out in the middle of the yard, usually a good place to put it. Generally, if you're putting something out in the middle of the yard, it's also going to be full sun. A lot of the plants that the butterflies are going to be attracted to are blooming plants, and most blooming plants are going to need at least 6 hours, somewhere in that range of sun, full sun. So, in terms of other places you can put it, you could also put it up against a fence. That would be fine. You could put it in the corner of a yard. That would be okay. The key is just to have as many open spaces on the sides as possible, and preferably open and on top as well. It is kind of recommended to maybe have a part of the garden in a somewhat protected area from the shade. So if you're doing it along the fence, kind of the corner area would be protected area from the wind. So maybe that corner area can be your protection from wind, and then as it goes out into the open, you get more of your flowering type stuff. One thing that kind of won't work in terms of a butterfly garden is kind of a full shade area. There's not going to be really a lot of plants that the butterflies are attracted to that are also full shade plants. And also what doesn't work as well is maybe a smaller type of location. They need some sort of open sides and at least an open top. If it's all enclosed, it's just hard for them to kind of want to fly in there and explore, basically. So now that we know kind of where we're going to be putting our restaurant and where we're going to be putting our butterfly garden, let's talk about kind of the food options that we're going to be offering for the customers and for the butterflies. So in my pizza restaurant terms, I could just offer pepperoni pizza. That could be it. I would do okay. I'd get a good wide range of customers probably. And how that translates to butterfly gardening, technically a butterfly garden could just be 100 pintas. You could just plant a big mass of pintas in the middle of your yard. That's technically a butterfly garden. You are going to attract butterflies doing that. You're going to see more than you probably had before, but it's not really the best approach to getting the widest range of butterflies. So in order to get more butterflies, it's better to offer a wide range of different types of bloom foods. So not only pepperoni pizza, but maybe a vegetarian pizza, a gluten-free pizza. All different wide options are going to be beneficial to the butterfly garden. As a rule of thumb, what I've heard is it's usually best to try to keep around 5 different types of blooms in your garden going at all times in order to attract the widest range of butterflies. So anywhere that you can get close to that's going to be good. Any more, it's always going to be better. So now that we know kind of types of food that we're serving, we need a wide range of different things that we're offering. Let's talk about kind of the quantities of things that we're serving. So in restaurant terms, I could just make 2 pizzas, a couple different kinds of those pizzas. As soon as I'm sold out, I'm done, and that's my business. Whatever I make is what I make. Or I could offer a lot more. I could offer hundreds of pizzas in a day. I would obviously make more money and therefore get more customers or more butterflies. So in terms of the garden layout, what we're talking about is whenever you're picking plants or laying out your plants, you want to do things in quantities. So not just 1 or 2 of something. It is usually better to have mass plantings of the same plant and kind of repeat those mass plantings throughout the garden. What the butterflies will notice not necessarily just this one pinta bloom mixed in with a whole bunch of others. They're going to know a big swath of the pinta blooms or a big swath of lantana. That's what's going to catch their attention. All right, so now that we know kind of where we're putting our garden, we know the types of foods that we should be offering, we know the quantities of things that we should be offering. Let's talk about in terms of business, kind of our hours of operation. So in a restaurant sense, you could just be open for lunch. That's it. You serve the customers that are needing a lunch, basically. Any other customers you don't really care about, that could be your business. Or you could approach it a different way and be open, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, open throughout the whole day. How that translates into butterfly gardening is you want to try to pick blooms that are going to be blooming throughout the whole year. So not just things that are maybe in bloom right now that when you go to the nursery and see. You kind of want to plan for things that'll be blooming in the fall as well. All right, so now that we know kind of everything that we're doing, let's talk about how to lay things out, basically, and how this translates into terms of the restaurant would be kind of like the dining experience. Whenever you go to a restaurant, there's going to be probably tables that fit a lot of people, and maybe be tall tables for just 2 people, maybe lower tables for just the kids, things like that. How that translates into butterfly gardening is you're going to want a wide range of different blooms at different heights. So there's going to be some butterflies that they're never really going to be searching really too high for their food source. They're only going to want maybe low-growing, ground cover type stuff. And then on the opposite side, there's going to be some that really just kind of soar, kind of stay up high. They don't really get too low and look for food sources. So a good mixture of different types of plants, but not only that, a mixture of different type blooms is really going to add a lot to your butterfly garden. All right, so now that we know kind of all the elements that kind of go into making a butterfly garden, let's talk about kind of how to lay this out, the layout of the garden. What I normally like to start with are things called anchor plants. What an anchor plant is going to be a plant like a Dahlia, where this is going to be an evergreen type plant. It's going to look pretty much the same all year long, and it's going to be one that butterflies are really attracted to. The way you would use this in your design is, I forgot to mention, is normally people design things in odd numbers, so numbers 3, 5, 9. It's apparently more appealing to the eye to do it that way. Butterflies don't care about that. As long as there is a mass of those plantings, usually that's all they care about. They don't care about the number. But how I would use these, usually in maybe groupings of 3 or so. This would be, depending on the type of Dahlia I choose, this would normally be kind of more of a background type thing. This is something that's going to kind of keep the background look the same throughout the whole year. And it's going to be something that brings in butterflies throughout the whole year too. It has a long bloom season, spring and in the fall usually. Now, everything else that's going to kind of go into your garden is going to be mainly for you, not for the butterfly in terms of the eye appeal for you. The butterfly is not really going to care about how it looks like. In restaurant terms, most people don't go to the restaurant because the building looks cool. They go because the food's good. And that's kind of what the butterflies are there for. They're there for the food. What we're doing now is just kind of making the building. And all that's going to matter is how we want it to look. But a general rule is just worry about the heights of things. If you can do that, that's going to go a long way in how things look and how things grow. So if I don't have a lot of room, but I'll kind of just lay things out, just kind of what I would do. So in your back, you normally would have your anchor plants. These are going to be things that are usually 3 feet tall, maybe even taller, somewhere in that range. Your next layer up, you could have things that are maybe in the 2-foot range, things that don't get too tall, but also would take up, a nice wide range of something. One other thing I forgot to mention, and I'll kind of review some of this as we go in, is butterflies, one of their favorite types of blooms are going to be a bloom type that is considered a pad, or something they can land on. So this right here, the yarrow, is a great example of that. It almost has a landing pad for them to land on, and they can taste all this stuff. Another example of a good landing pad would be things like the echinacea or coneflower. What's that? Yes. Yep. A good example of something that is maybe height would be these right here, these gomphrenias. These are going to get very, very tall.
What did you say they were called?
Gomphrena.
Gomphrena.
Yeah, gomphrena with the G. These are going to get very tall. This is an annual option. A lot of times in your butterfly garden, you're going to have a mixture of perennials and annuals. The perennials kind of more as, you know, your staple plants, your anchor plants, and then annuals to really brighten things up and really to attract the butterflies. Probably more so than some of these annuals, honestly. All right, so yeah, you'll have a mixture of anchor plants, a mixture of pad type plants. A good mixture of Texas natives is always key as well. That would be things like your echinacea, your salvias here, would be a good native plant. Antennas, one of my favorites for this area in terms of butterfly gardening. You'll notice most of these blooms are somewhat of that either pad shape like this, or what you also notice is they are attracted to what would be called tubular type flowers as well. This would be an example of one that has the tubular type flowers that they like. But mainly if you just kind of look for those type of blooms without knowing really much else about the plant, you probably won't go wrong. That's kind of what they're looking for. Another good one in terms of what would be considered a pad type plants. Easy for them to land on, somewhat low growing. One of the favorite ones here. The reason I like these is you can plant these in the fall as well, so it's a good option for a fall bloom. Some of the plants that I wish we had on hand that we don't have right now to look out for would be things like Gregg's blue mist flower.
That's what I thought.
Yes, that's going to be one of the monarch's favorite ones to use.
When does it bloom?
Basically, mine has just started to bloom now, and it will go through most of the summer and into the fall. So it's one of the better ones for fall type bloom, which would be kind of hard in terms of butterfly gardening. Other things to consider. So basically what we have here are plants that I like, native Texas plants, anchor plants, you know, evergreens, things like that. What we haven't gone over are maybe plants that I don't really like, but the butterflies do, so that's why I'm including them. This would be an example. This is called pincushion flower. Nothing wrong with this plant, I just think it's not the prettiest plant, but since it has this kind of pincushion bloom, this is one that you will generally find a lot of butterflies landing on. So include it in your garden just for the butterflies, maybe not for you, you don't like the look of it, but it is one that's going to maybe draw more butterflies than others. These I do like. These are called butterfly bush. I guess you can, guess why I would like that for butterfly gardening. Usually, if you can find a variety that's more of the dwarf varieties, I seem to have more luck with those for whatever reason. They're easier to maintain in the garden. They look a little better, in my opinion, in the garden. And then another one of the butterfly's favorites is this right here, Sweet Spire. It's just finishing up bloom. It is a early spring type bloomer. A little bit different bloom than what we talked about here, but for whatever reason they love to land on these little tassel things and just hang out here all day and feed on this plant. So it's another one of their favorites. All right.
Is there any specific thing about Proven Winners versus regular pollen?
No, Proven Winners is just a company.
Okay.
They are a well-known company. It's kind of like a name brand plant. It's the best way to think about it. They're going to have a great product because they have that name brand associated with them. But yeah, there's not necessarily a better plant than this one just based on the pollen. Okay, so now that we've covered kind of all of the types of plants that you can use in butterfly gardening, we've kind of covered how to lay them out and why we're laying them out and those reasons. Let's quickly talk about things that you would put in your garden that don't really have anything to do with plants at all. And what that's mainly going to be in terms of restaurant is going to be offering beverages and a place to kind of hang out. So in terms of beverages for your butterfly, all you really need is basically a watering spot, and the easiest way to do that is what I found is I like using these little terracotta plant holder things. but any kind of plate or anything that'll hold just a shallow amount of water will work. You can fill it up with anything from sand, dirt, pebbles, compost, really anything. Right here I just have some, I believe it's decomposed granite. From that point on, you just saturate this. You don't want it puddled, but you just want it kind of, you know, pretty damp. But you don't really want to puddle there. And what will happen is a butterfly will land on this. With their feet, they will feel the moisture of this dirt in here. Then that tells them, okay, this is something I can drink, basically. If you were just to fill this up with just water, no sand or rocks or anything else like that in there, what will happen is they might land on the edge, try to, you know, test it out with their feet, and if their feet start to get too wet, they won't like that. They'll think they're going to drown in that, or they don't want to get their wings wet, so they'll just go leave. They need a spot that is kind of wet, but not to where they're going to get too wet, if that makes sense.
So do you put that on the ground?
Yes, you can do it on the ground. That's generally the best spot, or a slightly elevated spot. You don't always have to use water. You can use other things like Gatorade, honey water. You can dilute organic juice with water. You use that. If you are going to use those options, you probably do want to raise it up because you're going to be attracting ants at that point. Anytime you have ants near butterflies, you want to get those ants away. They will attack the butterfly they can, and they will try to kill it. So,
what about a small bird bath?
Small bird bath would work just fine, as long as you're able to, in my opinion, fill that bird bath with some pebbles or something, so it's not just an open puddle of water. It's more of like this kind of consistency.
Well, like things like they're competing with the birds.
That could happen, but I would guess that hopefully if you fill it with rocks and stuff, the birds won't be concerned with it at that point. And hopefully there won't be, you know, birds around it. But if there are birds on that spot, a butterfly's probably not going to land next to it.
That's what I had.
Yep. So besides a watering spot, another element you can add to your garden is what's called a basking stone or a basking spot. And this can be anything as simple as just a rock like this. It can be a stone statue. Generally, it's going to be something that is kind of in the sunlight. Generally, that's something that kind of radiates heat, that maybe stays warm. And yeah, what it's used for is basically how butterflies get energy is they open their wings to the sunlight. The heat and the sunlight kind of energizes their wings, and that's what kind of gives them their flight, their energy to fly in a way. So giving them a spot to where they can just hang out, put their wings out, and just relax for a bit is also a good element to have in the garden. All right. Oh yeah, and then one other thing you can also add, and this is more of like a treat rather than anything else. You can take a plate like this, and if you were to put some rotting fruit on it, old apples, old watermelon, not really citrus, but just old fruit in general, old bananas, the decomposing fruit will attract butterflies. They are attracted to the sugars and the minerals and all that kind of stuff that's in there. So that's another thing you can put out just to attract butterflies as well.
Wouldn't you need to double plate that to keep the ants
Yes. Yep. And
off of it? So you get a bigger container
Yep.
that's filled with water and put the fruit in.
Yep. So
the
basically,
middle of it.
what you're saying is, yeah, make like a moat around
Yes.
your fruit thing. That's one way to do it. You can also, if you don't want to go through that trouble, just put it on an elevated spot. Maybe put it on top of your basking stone. That'll help a little bit. Keep an eye on it. But yeah, the key is, if you ever see ants on it, get it out of there. You don't want the ants and the butterflies. Okay.
What about the squirrels? Will the squirrels compete with it? 'Cause my squirrels are awful.
You know, probably.
Because they competed with the bird feeder.
Yeah, the
I just
squirrels
got an
will-
electric one that went up and down, and they would just
Yeah.
hang off the side. And
The squirrels will be attracted to it. Just keep an eye on it. The squirrels aren't going to bother the butterflies in any way. They're not going to try to hurt the butterflies. So it's okay if they steal a couple things of fruit, as long as there's still a few there. It's really the ants. That's the main thing you got to watch out for.
Okay.
Ants really is what will cause damage. All right. So now that we kind of know the elements that we're going to go into our garden, let's talk about specifically trying to attract butterflies to this garden that we just made. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the Black Swallowtail. That's the one we're going to specifically kind of try to focus on today. It is one of the more common ones for this area. It's an easy one to spot. It's considered somewhat of a larger type butterfly, and it's probably one that you've seen many times in your life already. So, in order to attract black swallowtails, we first need to think about what their host plant is. Their host plant for this area is mainly going to be either rue, fennel, parsley, or dill. What I have found is fennel seems to be by far their favorite one. It's usually the one that I can grow the easiest as well. So for my butterfly garden, I have a pretty nice patch of fennel off to the side where I am generally expecting to see swallowtail caterpillar eggs, caterpillars, and if I don't take them in, then somewhere in that general area I'll start to see the chrysalis as well usually. So in order to kind of start attracting the swallowtails, start off by either picking out one of those 4 types of plants, generally fennel. Try to plant in a mass, hopefully about 3 plants or so, kind of all in that same area to give a nice wide area for the black swallowtails to find. What you will find is they will lay their eggs on the tips of the fennel, if that's what you're using, but generally any kind of plant they choose to lay on is going to be at the tip of the leaf. The egg, let me see if I got a picture of the eggs real quick. Okay, I don't have that one, so never mind. The egg's usually very tiny, like a yellowish color usually, about half the size of like a donut sprinkle, is usually how I look at it. They're generally just going to be one egg at a tip of a leaf, and then maybe a few inches or a few feet down you'll find another one. They're not generally going to be in a line, they're just going to be single. Generally you should be able to find anywhere from 5 to 20 eggs per laying session basically. The last one that just laid on mine had 13 eggs that all hatched, so somewhere in that range is generally what you'll find. It'll stay in egg stage for anywhere from 3 to 9 days. After that 3 to 9 days, it goes into a larva stage. This stage can take anywhere from 10 to 30 days. So keep that in mind in terms of the host plant material that you have. Once that caterpillar emerges, kind of plan on needing at least 15 days of food in order for them to be able to make it through their whole life cycle. Let's say you're getting to day 10 and you realize, my plants are almost completely eaten. There's some things you can do. You don't have to go buy more plants and hope for them to catch up. You go to the grocery store, buy things of parsley, things of fennel, put that in a cup of water, they'll eat that just fine. You're kind of in a pinch to do that.
What about predators?
Predators? Is that what you said?
Does anything come and eat them?
Yep, so what you'll need to watch out for in terms of predators are mainly going to be wasps. That's going to be your biggest one. Birds, somewhat too. Generally, birds are going to leave them alone. Caterpillars, they have a lot of weird colors on them. Generally, that kind of scares most birds. What I found is mainly wasps are going to be your main predator, and then things like just environmental hazards. So a bad storm knocks them off the plant, they don't find their way back, things like that is mainly what you're going to find. So in terms to kind of help fight those, what I do is generally after I've noticed eggs on a plant, after they've hatched, after they've maybe gone through their first week or so, what I normally like to do is take cuttings of that host plant, put it in a thing of water, bring it inside, and kind of just raise them myself to ensure that wasps aren't getting them, ensure that the storms aren't messing with them. And then in the end, I get to kind of let them go and watch their first flight as well.
One of the things that I do for my wasps, because they like to land in my entrance way, because I've got a lot of grip and they've got places to hide and make those mud things. I use vinegar and water to keep them away. Does that hurt the butterflies?
As far as I know, it's not going to be something, let's say if you were to get the vinegar and water on a plant, it's not going to hurt the butterfly to then go visit that plant. I'm sure vinegar probably would damage the butterfly a little if it were to get on it. But in terms of things that you're spraying to hurt wasps and not hurt butterflies, that's probably one of the better ones, I would say.
Good.
All right, so after they're in a larval stage, what they'll do is, during the larval stage, what they'll do is go through what's called an instar, and they'll go through 5 stages, and basically what they're doing is just eating and getting so big that their skin can't contain them anymore, so they have to shed that skin, and that's called an instar, and they basically shed that and become bigger and have a new skin on them at that point. They'll go through 5 of those, taking anywhere from 10 to 30 days. The warmer it is, the quicker it'll be. The colder it is, the longer it'll be generally. So this time of year, you're going to be closer to your 10 to 15 days rather than your 30 days, most likely. From there, we're going to go into a chrysalis stage. What that looks like, as I'm sure you all know, is going to be a somewhat cocoon-type looking thing where the caterpillar will go through metamorphosis. At this point, it is turning from the caterpillar into the butterfly. That can take anywhere from 9 to 20 days in terms of the black swallowtail. They also can go through an overwintering period where they will go into their chrysalis and then not come out for anywhere from 9 months. So I've had some that seemed like they were in there for a year before they came out. And it can be kind of cool. You know, you raise them inside, all of them hatch, and maybe have one or two that just stay in their chrysalis. Put them on a windowsill or a shelf or something, and then literally in 9 months or a year, you'll walk into your room and you'll see a butterfly from there. And you won't remember where it came from or how it got there. All right. Okay, so then after the chrysalis stage, after it emerges as a butterfly, it's going to stay as a butterfly from anywhere from 6 to 14 days. They don't live long at all. Their main goal is to basically feed and find a mate to make more eggs. That's really their only goal, so that's why they don't live that long. In total, the complete life cycle can take anywhere from 28 to 71 days, again, depending on the temperature. So in the warmer part of the year, it's probably going to be quicker. As we go into the fall, that wing kind of gets longer, basically. All right, are there any questions or anything so far before we just go into identifying common butterflies?
All this can be done in containers?
Yes, yeah, containers are perfectly fine. A lot of my butterfly garden is in containers because I don't have the open kind of area to be able to plant, so I have to put them in containers and kind of move them into open areas. Yeah, nothing. I'm trying to think of any downsides to containers. I can't really, as long as you're using big enough containers. Any of these plants can get to their full mature size, offering all the blooms. Maybe one of the downsides is you will have to use maybe a lot of containers to kind of get that kind of mass type planting that they like. But you could just always put maybe more plants in one container than you normally would to kind of achieve that same effect too. So containers work great. All right, any others? Okay, let me just go over a quick few butterflies that you see in this area. We'll talk about what they look like, what their host plants are. That'll give you a better idea of how to get them into your garden. All right, to start off, this is the question mark butterfly. One of the easiest ways to identify this one, it has a very unique wing shape. That's probably one of the only butterflies in this area that have like a bat wing looking type. It's going to be a somewhat big butterfly, somewhere in about this range, a few inches. Its host plant are elms, hackberries, and nettles. So this would be one that's kind of more of a tree type host plant. You can see what its caterpillar looks like. What you'll notice is a lot of these that we're about to go over are going to have what look like spiky things on them. Generally, it's generally a good rule of thumb. Any kind of caterpillar that has spiky things on it, you maybe don't want to touch, maybe be poisonous. All of these that we're about to talk about, though, you don't have to worry about that. They're going to look mean, but you can touch them. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. The next one is called a skipper. This one is considered a more smaller butterfly. It's going to be generally probably harder to see. Their flight patterns are kind of spastic, lower to the ground, and they're just kind of all over the place. A good way to kind of identify them is their wings. They have a very distinct smaller underwing and then kind of a very distinct larger upper wing. It reminds me of a plane for some reason. And that's kind of how I generally notice these ones. Their host plants are going to be hibiscus, mallow, and hollyhocks. And they're ones that generally their host plants are more kind of out in a wooded area kind of thing. You don't see their host plants generally in a garden setting so much, but you could.
Mallow like marshmallow?
Rose mallow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly, rose mallow.
Okay.
Next, and this is probably my second favorite one to grow or to raise, it's called the Gulf fritillaria. This one's very common in this area. It's a medium-sized one, about yay big or so. Very distinct kind of metallic kind of gray underside to the wing. That's kind of how you'll notice it. It is one that has a caterpillar that looks, again, very dangerous, but no harm comes from it at all. Its host plant is going to be the passion vine, mainly. And an idea of what its egg looks like is right there. It is one that will lay the eggs, again, on the tips of the leaves of the passion vine, and generally one egg at a time rather than a cluster. And you should get, usually about 10 to 20 eggs, somewhere in that range per mother, depending on the size of the plant, things like that.
Passion vine can be extraordinarily
It
invasive.
can, yes. So if you are gonna, that's in terms of
Extraordinary.
choosing things in pots. Put a passion vine in a pot. That's probably a good option for that. If not, plant it in a part of the garden to where you're okay with it spreading, let's say 10 feet this way, 10 feet that way. It will just shoot up random shoots across your yard. So that's either a good thing if you're someone like me, or a terrible thing if you're trying to maintain a nice lawn or anything like that. All right, so next we have a buckeye, and it's kind of common to see. It's kind of easy to see why this one got its name from these large eye-type spots on it. Right here. These are used, I believe, as a predatory defense. They're supposed to confuse predators. They think that's an eye of an animal, therefore it's a large animal rather than this tiny bug. Kind of the idea. The buckeye's host plant are going to be things like frog fruit, snapdragon, Ruellia, paintbrush, small type eggs, green, not too much of a fancy underside, kind of a brownish to the boring, but generally what you'll see are these big spots, and that's how you'll identify that one.
What about hanging baskets? Is that a deterrent to have snapdragons and hanging baskets?
No, I don't see any reason why not. Yeah.
Because that's what I put my snapdragons in.
Yeah, there's no reason that it shouldn't. There's no reason that a butterfly would not be attracted to a hanging basket. But let's say if the hanging basket is under a patio or in an area where maybe the fan's going, where it's real windy, that might be the deterrent rather than just them being in a plant. That makes sense. All right, so next up is sulfurs. There's a wide range of sulfurs in this area. The reason I like these is they're a very bright neon color. It's a cool kind of contrasting color in your garden. Have a somewhat spastic flight as well too, so they're going to be darting all around for the most part. Sulfur's host plant, the things like sienna, and for the dainty sulfur, things like Dahlberg daisy. The dainty sulfur is just a tiny, kind of more yellow, kind of like this color, tiny little sulfur butterfly. That's really attractive as well. All right, next up are gray hair streak butterflies. These are another, really tiny one, very common. Kind of how you will notice these is by these weird little fins at the bottom of the wings, is what I normally notice. Kind of like a tiny little tail on the end of the wings, basically. Once again, small, very kind of spastic in their flight. Not much gliding, like in terms of like the monarchs, the swallowtails. They're just going to be darting all around. Kind of hard to see for that reason, kind of hard to identify until they stop and you kind of get a look at what their wings look like.
And they sort of sit on the plant and
they
rub
do.
them together.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know what that's for?
I don't.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I
really
don't know.
cute.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting movement. It's kind of a unique movement in terms of butterflies. If I had to guess, I'm sure it's some sort of defensive mechanism, maybe, that they're doing. I really don't know why they're doing that. But yes, that is kind of a good way to identify.
What about pets in the yard with the butterflies? Does it scare them off?
Yes, it will. Cats, for sure. Cats try to catch them. Dogs, maybe not as much. But anything, if the butterfly feels like something has grabbed its attention, whether it be a cat, a dog, if it feels like something's starting to follow it or try to get it, then yeah, it'll get out of there as quickly as possible. No matter if it's starving, no matter if it's thirsty. Its main mindset is, survival.
Escape.
Yeah, escape basically. So having an area where, maybe it's, protected from the wind, protected from animals, protected from birds, those will all help. But it's not necessary in order to get the butterflies there. All right, let's go to the giant swallowtail. This is a very common one for this area as well. Very easy to recognize, probably the largest butterfly that we've talked about so far today. What you will notice is the almost completely yellow underside of the wing, kind of as it's flapping and as it's flying. Its caterpillar looks very unique to all the other caterpillars we talked about. No spines as a form of defense. Really what this is trying to mimic, what I've heard is it's trying to mimic kind of like bird droppings. So that way no one messes with it because I think it's just bird droppings on the leaves basically. And it kind of does look like, especially in person, they really do look like that. Once again, you'll find the eggs towards the end of the leaves. Generally just one egg at a time per leaf, somewhere in that range, not mass plantings. For the giant swallowtails, what I've mainly grown them on are either rue or citrus. They love like orange leaves, lime leaves, any kind of citrus leaf you can get them to host on that as well. Red Admiral, very common. Kind of, you'll notice the orange striping on this one. The Admiral's host plants are mainly nettles, so not necessarily one that you're going to find easily in a nursery type setting, more something that's kind of out in the wild. So you'll mainly probably attract these more so for your nectar plants rather than your host plants. And let's end with monarchs, probably the most common butterfly everyone knows about, probably the most popular butterfly. One of the coolest butterflies in terms of what they do and their migration and what their life cycles can be like. Pretty much everyone knows what one of these looks like. Very typical orange, kind of what you're going to see. They're considered a larger type butterfly. They're going to be a few inches across at least. And they have a very distinct caterpillar as well. Their host plant is only going to be milkweed. The best types of milkweed are usually your native types for this area. They will kind of host on any type of milkweed you get from them. All right, well, I appreciate y'all coming in.
Thank you very much.
This was amazing.